In today's episode, I'm talking to entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs, and executives about how to make sure that in the last month of the year, you review everything you did last year so that you can set yourself up for ultimate success the following year and do what I do in my businesses, which is guarantee absolute growth every single year. Do not miss this episode if you're a business person. Hello, my entrepreneurs, CEOs, executives, and business owners all out there in the world. Today, I'm talking to you about your annual business review. Now, this is one of those aspects of business that I can tell you 95% of the business owners I work with, the CEOs that I coach, and the business executives I meet all around the world, this is one aspect that almost all of them are missing. Now, the only exception is those who are CEOs of public companies or executives at public companies. You see, what I'm about to talk to you about today is literally a requirement for public companies. This is something that just about every public company in the world does on an annual basis. And big companies definitely do it, even if they're not public. Now, you take a company like Apple. Can you imagine Apple going through an entire year and at the end of the year, sometimes say in December, not sitting down and saying, okay, let's review how everything in 2016 went? Would that even be in the realm of possibilities? Absolutely not. Let me tell you, a company like Apple at the end of the year, sometime in November or December, is sitting down and they are going back and they are dissecting everything they did that year from every perspective you can imagine to see what was successful and what was not successful. They're going to look at the annual plan that they had for this year, so say 2016, and they're going to say, how did we do compared to our plan? Now, some of you didn't create a plan at the beginning of this year. Another crazy thing that I can't imagine how someone would run a business like that, but by the way, that's the next episode. I'm going to talk to you about how to create that plan. But for right now, I'm assuming a lot of you didn't create a solid plan for this year. So what I'm talking to you about is how do you then go back and analyze your year, even if you didn't have a plan, because there's still a way of doing it. But if you think about it, these public companies are going back then and they're reviewing their financials because clearly you have to see how much money you made. You also do a sales review. Now, some of you are going to say, Armand, but aren't sales and financials the same thing? Absolutely not. Sales has to do with how much did you sell? What did you sell? What percentage of the mix of different things did you have? When did you have high sales? When did you have those drops in sales? What was the reason for the drop in sales? And was there anything that dropped in sales this year? And why did it drop? Was it that it changed? Was it that you took your focus off of it? Was there a certain thing that made it drop? Whatever it is, you got to analyze those things, right? Your employees, HR, project success, investments, marketing, debt analysis, contract review, and pricing. All these things are things that need to happen at the end of the year so that you can review the year that you've had. And today in this episode, I'm going to talk to you about some of the most important things that you need to go back and review and how you need to review them. And you've got to make sure that you do this. So for me, I do this sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas because that's the time that's slowest for me. I've got a lot of employees on vacation. I've got some downtime. It's a perfect time for me to sit down and analyze my year. And conveniently, it's of course right before the new year starts. So I can analyze the year that I've just had, which is almost over. And then I can start working on a plan for my next year so that I can set my business up for ultimate success the following year. That's why when you look at any of my businesses, it's incredible. From one year to the next, typically we take on new things. We start doing bigger things. And you look at the growth of my company sometime, and you can literally look at our financials and go, wait a minute, something happened here. And guess what it is? It's me doing my annual business review, followed by my annual business plan for the next year. And for me, again, I've always done it over a weekend or something like that. And I lock myself up in a room. I don't do it in a setting where I'm being distracted by people. So what I like to do is typically I'll go get a hotel room somewhere and I'll lock myself up. Or what I'll do in a lot of cases is I'll sign up for a seminar or an event or something I can go to that's about business, that gets my mind thinking about my business. And while I'm there, I end up doing this. Now, I find it kind of interesting that I actually do my best work sometimes in those settings, even though it's kind of disruptive because I'm sitting there in a seminar or an event and I'm on my laptop sort of working on something else. But if there's someone talking about business, it triggers things for me. Now, the problem I had in the last 25 years is no one really told me what to review and how to review these things. So I had to go reading through books, digging through all kinds of content at what I should be looking at every year. And really what I did is I started studying public company because aren't they the ones with the best practices out there? Wouldn't the biggest and best companies in the world, the ones that are the most funded, the ones that have all the resources, wouldn't they be good ones to learn from? Of course they are. So guess what? That's what I did. I studied what public companies do. I studied some of the biggest companies in the world, and I started to implement some of those same things in my own business. Now, here are some of the areas that you're going to review. I'm going to go through them one by one, and we're going to talk about what you need to be reviewing. And you have to understand this. You must do this every year. So if you're getting close to the end of the year, this is the time that you've got to be doing your annual business review. And again, I want to tell you, this episode is about the annual business review. The next episode is about your annual business plan. And then from there, we're going to go into some other things that relate to this, such as quarterly reviews, because you do need to do a quarterly review and plan. I'm also going to talk to you in a future episode about year-end financial analysis, because you need to know how to do your year-end financial analysis and HR analysis and things like that. But today, this episode is a really good one, because this is one where I'm going to sort of give you the basics of all these things so that you can go out there and you have an idea of what you need to be reviewing, so that you can end this year off strong and then have next year get started with an incredible plan that's going to set you up for ultimate success. So let's start with financials. Now, financials, I'm going to do an entire episode on this, so I don't want to get too deep into it, but sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas, you need to go back and you need to look at your last year. Now, when I do this, I don't actually analyze the calendar year. Instead, I do the last 12 months, because I don't look at November or December. Instead, I look at November and December of the previous year. That way, I can look at actual financials for the year. Now, in some cases, for some businesses, it may or may not make sense to do that. So you might look at just 10 months of financials. But either way, at sometimes, say in early December, I'm sitting down and I'm analyzing everything I did January through October. I'm looking at the financial results of how my company has done. And I dig deep into every different area, including the 3 key financial documents: your profit and loss statement, your balance sheet, and your statement of cash flows. Now, I review all those things from a month-to-month basis, quarterly basis, and an annual basis. And during that financial review is when I find out really what the health of my company looks like, right? Now, again, there's a full episode on that. So in that episode, I'm going to talk to you about exactly how to do that. The next thing you're going to do, which I touched on just slightly already, is a sales review. You need to go back and look at the entire year. Again, you can look at the last 10 months or the last 12 months, because you're not doing this past January 1st. It's very important to understand. You cannot do an annual review of your last year once the year's over, because the problem with that is if you do that, now you don't have information to create the plan. So for me, reviewing last year is purely for the purpose of making a plan for next year. And I want next year's plan created before Christmas comes around, because I want to know that January 1st, we're going to hit the ground running. So that's why you're typically looking at just the last 10 months, right? Which will be January through, say, October. And again, possibly you can just throw November, December of the previous year in there. And for some companies, they have a fiscal year like that, in fact, okay? So when you're doing your sales review, you're going back and you're looking at the things in your sales systems that worked or didn't work, things that worked really well, things that didn't work so well. And you're really looking at your business and analyzing, what is my business all about? So let's say you own a small plumbing company. Small meaning you have, let's say, 5 to 10 employees, and you guys do plumbing and all this kind of stuff. Well, see, at the end of the year, you got to go back, because you might have started the year thinking that you were in the business of residential plumbing, right? And that was your main thing, but business plumbing was sort of a side thing. And you may have thought that the main thing that you guys are going to do is, say, unclog drains, right? And I'm using this as a silly example. I just want you to understand plumbing is a business that I think most people sort of inherently understand what are some of the basics involved with it, since most of us have dealt with a plumber before, right? So then you go and you look at it at the end of the year and say, okay, what kind of a company were we really? What that means is you go back, you analyze your sales. Now you look at your sales channels. For example, for plumber, it might be consumer versus business. What percentage of my sales came from consumers and what percentage came from business? And let me tell you why that's important. Because I know a lot of plumbers out there who, for example, will say quite the opposite of what I just said a minute ago. They'll say, we make most of our money, we make our biggest money from business accounts, right? Blah, blah, blah. And the reason they say that is because businesses often are willing to pay a lot more, and the money is just sort of spent freely. And when they have a problem, it's a bigger problem typically. And they'll say that's what they want. So they spend all their time and effort trying to go after business clients. Whereas the consumer clients, the residential clients, come to them very easily, but they don't really value them, right? So I've sat there doing coaching with someone who owns a plumbing company, and what I'll see is at the end of the year, they keep talking about business. And then I look at their sales, and only 5% of their sales came from businesses. And I'm like, why are you pretending like you're a company that services businesses when really your business is residential? And what it is they have this dream of one day being this company that provides business services, right? And they're living that dream. And when they do earn that money, it's easy money, right? They go and they do one job, they get $1,000, like, oh my God. What they don't understand is, hey, that $1,000 isn't coming up enough to really be a differentiator for you. So one of the things you do with your sales is you dig down into those things. What is specifically working and what is not working? And what are you really? Who are you really? Now, the other thing is one is those sectors, like who are you selling to, right? The second one is going to be what types of products or services you're selling most of. So maybe if you're a plumber, you think of yourself as a service-based business, right? So your business is providing a service of unclogging drains and things like that. But then you might look at your last year and realize, wow, 25% of your sales came from product sales, right? Now, I don't know the plumbing industry enough to know what those products might be. Maybe it's that you're selling Drano and stuff like that. When you go to someone's house, you fix their plumbing, you're like, oh, by the way, if you pour this down once a week, you won't have to call us as often, right? Or maybe part of what you're selling is shower heads or something else like that. So the point is this, you start to analyze what kind of a company are you really? And then what you'll notice is maybe you'll notice, oh my gosh, 10% of our sales came from selling shower heads and Drano. And then you think, how much emphasis did we put on that? And you think about it and you're like, gosh, we put no emphasis on it, really. And then you start to get ideas. Wait a minute. What if we make it part of our recommended plan? Every house that we go to, we tell them that part of the plan to make sure they don't have to call us back again is to put Drano down their pipe once every 2 weeks. Right now, I don't know enough about plumbing to know if that's the secret, but who cares? Whatever the secret may be, that's the secret sauce. Now, guess what? You start having your guys carry Drano with them, and you start having them offer this, right? And the next thing you know, what ends up happening is now you're selling these products, and if before they were 5 or 10% of your sales, they might be 25% of your sales. So you're constantly going back and analyzing what you've sold, and you look for either things that you emphasized a lot that didn't sell very well, or things that you're not really emphasizing but are actually selling quite well. And so what you start finding is, like the shower head example might be silly, but what if you had a shower head that saved water, right? And every house you went to go unclog their toilet, you said, oh, by the way, I noticed, because you get to see their shower head, right? In every one of the houses, it's easy for you. You get to see their shower head. And guess what? You are the plumbing expert now. So if you turn around, you pull out a box and you say, hey, by the way, I noticed your shower head is not a water-saving shower head. We've got these shower heads, they're $99, but, they're going to save you about $10 a month in water bills. And so what that means is that within 10 months, they've already paid for themselves. And then everything after that just saves you money. And it's good for the environment. And by the way, they're really comfortable and great, blah, 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 blah. I don't know what the spiel is, but the key is you're constantly going back every year and you're looking at your last year. And then as part of your annual business plan, which we'll talk about next time, then you create a sales plan and exactly how you're going to go about marketing that thing and selling that thing. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about sales. There's a lot more to say. And in my seminars where I take people through this, in my business boot camp, I really get deep into exactly how to do this. But today, that's about as far as I can go. So the next thing you're going to want to analyze is your employees and your human resources. So you've got to look at your human resources, the people who work for you, and you've got to do an analysis of every single one of them for the last year. Now, this is the one that I'll admit to you, I have always been a little weak at this one because I hate sitting there and analyzing individuals and looking at how they did. It's one of the things I don't enjoy much. And so I try to get out of it as much as possible, but I can tell you it is important, and it's one of the things that's going to help your business grow more than you can imagine. So you're sitting there every year and you're analyzing your employees. Now, the official way of doing it is doing an employee review with them, right? But a part of it is you doing it on your own, just sitting there and saying, okay, I have all these human resources. And what we do is we put a dollar sign next to each of them. So we list all your employees. And when I do this with my coaching clients, I literally sit there, list all of their human resources. Now, they could be employees, contractors, whatever. But we list the people. Then we put something next to them. That's how much are they costing us, okay? And the total cost for the year. So we'll look at commission, bonuses, vacations, and benefits, anything that they have. And then we judge, what did we really get out of these people, right? What did they actually add to the business? And if they're related, they're doing sales or financials or something, that's easy. But then if they're not, they're doing some sort of operational thing, we still look at what did they really do for us? How many hours a week of work did they eliminate from me? Sometimes is the way that I rate these things. So you're making sure that every year you're going back and you're analyzing your human resources and seeing what worked and what did not work. And looking at your human resources practices, maybe your hiring practices, termination practices, legal stuff related to HR, which is, again, a whole nother episode that I'm going to do for you guys. And then, of course, that information is going to be used for creating your annual plan for next year as it relates to your employees. And you may decide that certain employees need to go, certain employees need to be moved, right? Things like that are critical. And so that is important to do every year. But then we move on to project analysis. So project analysis is looking at the various projects you had last year and the success that they had. Now, some of you have official projects and project managers. Most of you probably don't have that, but it's pretty easy to go back and think and maybe go search through your emails and some of the things like that and say, hey, what are some of the projects I started? What are some of the sort of ideas I had and the things that throughout the year we decided to do? And you go back and you look at how successful were those projects. Now, project is sort of a general term here that we're using to refer to anything that you do where you kind of do something that's outside of what you're normally doing on a day-to-day basis because you think you're going to create something within the company. So you go back and you review all of those projects. And again, at some point in a future episode, we're going to come back to projects. But at this point, that's all I'm going to say because all of you are running such vastly different projects. It would be impossible for me to give you enough information. But what I can tell you is you can sit down and say, in the last year, say, what are the 5 or 10 things that we tried out? That's usually a word that works for people. What did we try out? What did we decide to do? What was something new we decided to launch? Maybe it was a move. You moved your office. Maybe you decided that you were going to offer a new service or a new product, or you were going to do some big campaign, something out of the ordinary, right? So all of those things are the things that you're going to go back and analyze. The next thing is you're going to look at any investments you made and the payoff from them. So what financial investments did we make in the last year? And was there any payoff to them, right? Moving, by the way, to a bigger office or a bigger facility might be one of those things. For example, hiring people, even though we talk about people in HR, but then again, it comes back here. If you made a big hire, that's an investment, right? If you invested in a new product or service, we're going to analyze that. And what was the payoff of it? Okay. The next one is marketing review. You're going to go look at your marketing campaigns for the year. How much money did you invest in these different marketing? If you're doing online advertisement, let's say we look at the dollars and cents you put into it and figure out how did it work. If you're doing Groupons, let's say for your business, we're going to go back and say, okay, how did the Groupons do? We're going to go and look at every marketing campaign you have, at every place you spent money on marketing or effort or time on marketing. And we're going to analyze, did that pay off and how did it pay off? Because next year, we want to do more of what worked and a lot less of what didn't work, okay? The next thing is something that I'm shocked that people don't do, and it's a critical thing to do every year. You look at your debt service analysis. What does that mean? You look at all the money you're borrowing on everything, including credit cards that you may have, including loans that you may have taken, SBA loans, whatever else, anywhere where you have debt within your business. And you're looking at how much it's costing you to service that debt, because sometimes it is incredibly eye-opening. When you really look at it in the big scale, you take all the credit cards, you take all the loans, you put it all, you realize, oh my goodness, I've sat with people and they've looked at their debt analysis and realized that last year they spent $100,000. This is for a small business owner who's barely making $100,000 a year. They spent $100,000 servicing their debt, but they just didn't think about it or didn't notice it. And I look at them, I say, my goodness, you could have made an extra $100,000 if it wasn't for servicing that debt. Now, it's not an option for everybody, but we look at it and we look at it in a bigger scale so that we can really see what it's costing to be able to service all that debt. And it's important to do that. Now, for some of you, it's easy because you're not borrowing much money. Okay, but if you are, it's important to analyze it on a year-to-year basis. The next thing is a contract review and pricing. So you look at all the vendors, every place where you have a set sort of pricing on something, and you're going to say, well, Armand, I don't have too many of those. Trust me, you do. If you've got a phone bill, you've got electricity, you've got all sorts of things. And in many of your businesses, you have tons of contracts. So for my stuff, I have a ton of these things, and even some of the online services. Maybe you use Dropbox. Maybe you use Google Apps or some other tools like that, online tools. Anything that you are paying on a monthly basis, or you have an agreed upon pricing, even water delivery to your office, any of those things, office supplies, all of those things are critical things that every year you want to go back and review. And you want to look at what you're paying, because then in the annual business plan, one of the things you're going to do in December is you're going to have you or someone else reach out to every one of your vendors and try to lower your pricing for next year. You're going to try to lower your pricing. You're going to try to save costs. And you'd be surprised how some of these companies that you thought did not have negotiable pricing, they will absolutely negotiate with you on pricing. And it's important to every year go back and do that. And as your company gets bigger and bigger, this is the stuff that gets forgotten, right? But when you get bigger and bigger, you now have resources, people inside of your company who can help you do this, right? And so the key is to go back and analyze every single one of those contracts, every single one of the set pricing pieces that you have, and try to make sure that you understand where you were at last year so that you have the tools you need to create next year's plan. And that is what this episode is all about. You understanding that it's critical that at the end of the year, you've got to go back and you've got to analyze your entire business, get it all on paper, or if you like it electronically. Either way, you've got to document what happened last year, step by step by step, piece by piece by piece. Now, personally, when I do this, if I do it over the weekend for one of my companies, often what I'll do is I'll take 2 days. The first day, I'll go over what I did last year, and then maybe the first half of the day or 3/4 of the day, that's what I do. And then I move to, okay, what's my plan going on next year in the future? And by sticking those two things together, which again, the annual business plan is what I'm going to talk to you about in the next episode, that's how you get the biggest bang for your buck. But the key is you got to sit there for a couple of days, and depending on the size of your business, I can't imagine it being less than 2 days. These days with my bigger businesses, for me, it's maybe 3 or 4 days, but it's about sitting down and making sure that I absolutely commit the time to doing this. Now, in this episode then, I've sort of touched on some of these things. I touched on financial, sales, HR and employees, project success, investments, marketing, debt services, and contract review. But there's a lot more. There's legal. There's other critical aspects of your business, your operations, things like that I didn't get a chance to go into. But these are all the areas that you guys are going to have to dig into. So today, my entrepreneurs, my business people, my CEOs and my executives, I want you to go out there and I need you to commit to what you are going to do to make sure that this happens. Now, depending on where you live and what your situation is, I actually have an event that's set up just for this. It's a business boot camp where we literally take you through all this stuff. So if you have an interest in coming to that thing, go to our website and look it up and see if there's one coming up in your area. And if you're listening to this in the middle of the year, hey, it doesn't matter. Maybe now is the time for you to do it. Or maybe you're listening to this episode in January, February, and you're like, oh my gosh, I should have done this last month. It doesn't matter. Do it now. Do it next month. Get it done. And just look at the previous year or look at the last 12 months and make sure that you do this. But if you are listening to this thing at some point at the end of the year, towards the end of the year, that time between Thanksgiving and Christmas is the best time to do this because you can get it done. And then you can do what I'm going to talk about in my next episode, which is the annual business plan, and then create your plan for the following year. And if you do that, you are going to set yourself up to have incredible, incredible success. And then you'll add on to this your quarterly reviews, which is something, again, public companies do. And I'm going to talk to you about it and teach you the details of it in a future episode. And by doing that, the annual followed by the quarterlies, my goodness, you set your company up for ultimate success. And then you sprinkle in there that every month you're looking at your financials. Now what you have is you have a formula for an incredible, winning, successful plan that is going to help your business get to that next level. In my businesses, what I'll tell you I do is this. I do my annual review and annual plan. Then on a quarterly basis, I do a quarterly analysis and then a quarterly review and plan. Then on a monthly basis, I do a financial review and a financial budgeting for the next month. And then on a weekly basis, I do sort of updates on operations and projects and things. So for me, it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually, which again is exactly how public companies do it. And in fact, the annual and the quarterly reviews by these companies are required by law. They have to do them, at least in the United States. So these are best practices that you should learn and you need to put out there for yourself every day. So right now, when you finish this episode, decide when and where you're going to do this. If you're going to do it in a hotel room, then now is the time to pick the weekend, decide when you're going to do it, decide what hotel you're going to stay at, and then go book that hotel, literally put it on the calendar to go get this done. If you're going to come to one of my events and there's one that you can get to, book the flight to my event now. Go to titaniumsuccess.com, sign up, do whatever you're going to do, but commit to making sure that this year you absolutely commit to getting this done. And however you're going to do it, what I want from you today is I want you to commit to doing it. My entrepreneurs, business owners, amazing executives and CEOs out there, I love you all, and I want to remind you today, go out there and lead with your heart.